Hello and welcome to the Center for Spiritually Integrated Arts, a Centers for Spiritual Living teaching center. I am Reverend Dr. Raymont Anderson. I am the founder and the spiritual director. Now, as you are sitting there joining us, you may have questions, any number of questions, such as, who am I? How did I get here? Spiritually integrated arts means what exactly? What is a teaching center? Well, what is Centers for Spiritual Living? What is that? What does that even mean? Or New Thought, or religious science, or science of mind and spirit? You may have any number of questions about this specific community, about the parent organization, CSL, our philosophy, our teaching, our liberation theology. Any number of questions. Feel free to send an email. We look forward to connecting more and building our virtual community, our global community. And if you haven't connected yet on social media, feel free to do so. This is your invitation now. Also, did you know that all of our Sunday messages are archived on our YouTube channel? You can watch it anytime. Now, questions about anything, such as becoming a member. What does that mean? What does membership entail? And if you live somewhere far and already belong to a spiritual community, can you be a member of more than one? The simple answer is yes, you can. Just like you can shop at more than one grocery store, you can attend or be a member of more than one gym. We are building beloved community. So you can do both. You can be a member of both. You can be involved with both. That's what being in spiritual community means. So we welcome you. We invite you. We are so appreciative that you have found this community and that you have joined us today. We bless you. We love you. We welcome you. Live long and prosper. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the rest of our Sunday message. Love you. Connect with you soon. Blessings. Namaste and greetings. Welcome to week 2, March. Spring. Breathe. So our theme today, as we continue the theme of the month, that's how we've never done it. Today we are talking about up until now. up until now. So it is time to acknowledge our past, the good, the bad, and the ugly, while disentangling ourselves from it, while not being overly attached to it. It is time to both forgive and to release old patterns and old stories, even those patterns and stories that used to work well for us, if they no longer serve us now. Let's replace our old, I've always, it's always, you've always, they've always, we've always, fill in the blank. It's always been that way here. You've always liked my cooking. We've always gone to New York for vacation. How about we replace those old I've always with a new script, a new story, a new up until now kind of idea? By swapping out, by substituting the up until now with up until now, my experience has been fill in the blank. But now I choose fill in the blank with whatever that something better is. So up until now, I've always liked your cooking, but now I like my cooking. We've always done this on Saturdays up until now. And now I'm choosing to do this on Saturdays. Are we willing to evolve into a new way of showing up? A new fill in the blank with this and something better. The Buddha taught us not to be attached. And he referenced how attachment and one of its complementary cousins, resistance, were in essence the root of and the cause of suffering. So when we detach, we disentangle ourselves from both that kind of resistance, non life affirming, and that kind of attachment, non life affirming. Then we realize that we are able to both honor our past and learn from it while also moving freely without that non life affirming attachment, move freely without the non life affirming resistance to move freely on our present course in our life presently and thus forward into our future. What kind of stories do you tell about anything? What kind of stories do you tell about your family? What kind of stories do you tell about your relationships? What kind of stories do you tell about money and what money is and what money means and how to get it and how to spend it? When we look at our lives, we realize that there are chapters upon chapters, verses upon verses, volume upon volume of stories that we have told, that we have been told and we accepted, that we continue to tell without questioning. And all of them, in some way, shape, or form, connect to the once upon a time, we've always, I've always, it's always been, etc. Once upon a time. Well, how about that time be now? What new story on the blank page of your life are you willing to write? While remembering some of the old is fine and it is meant to be kept, but some of the old is not life affirming and it's time to release it. Dr. Holmes says, As we have proven that principle is not bound by precedent, we go into that realm which says, "Behold, I make all things new," not carrying with us the limited belief. He says belief, plural, that any of the limited beliefs that say all of the reasons and all of the conditions as to why whatever this is cannot be. Are we willing to release in order to stand in the mystery and the energy of infinite potential and possibility that is evermore and evermore life affirming? Do we believe that principle, spiritual law, is not bound by what was, by precedent? Just because there was a time where there was no smartphone, does that mean there never will be a smartphone? Just because there was a time when there was no such thing as open heart surgery, does that mean there never will be? Just because there was a time that there was no such thing as a world without war, does that mean there never will be? Does precedent get to govern how life is and will continue to be? See, oftentimes we are so bound by circumstance in much the way that the Greek story of Prometheus, who created humans, created humanity, and went against the will of Zeus to steal fire and give fire to the people and teach them how to make fire so that they could be warm and survive. And Zeus, being the tyrant that he was, punished Prometheus and bound him to a rock so that the eagle, a symbol of Zeus, would always come and peck his liver, devour his liver, simply for Prometheus, being an immortal, to have the organ come back, simply to have that be repeated again. How many of us can say the same kind of metaphorical, this story, this metaphor is very similar to our own lives? How many of us bind ourselves to relationships that don't serve us, where the relationship pecks at us and devours and drains us? How many of us are bound to a belief system about ourselves or something or someone else that pecks at us and devours, where the tyrant of some past idea, belief, paradigm drains us and pecks at us? Are we willing to be free from that? Dr. Holmes says, we all have the ability to transcend previous experiences and to rise triumphant above them. But we shall never triumph over them while we persist in going through the old mental reaction. If you want something new, you have to be something new, think something new, act something new. So we have the ability to live in a world that works for all, a world of peace, without war, a world of peace. We have the ability to transcend war, transcend hunger, we have the ability to transcend all of that stuff, to rise triumphantly. But we're not doing it because collectively we are still bound and being pecked by the old mental gyrations of whatever that collective consciousness is that will not let go of that thought form, that way of being, that way of showing up. So we can't transcend and rise above. Now, think about it for a moment. If I were to ask you which of these images would best give you the opportunity to, one, identify where the traffic is, and two, by identifying it, you are then able to avoid it or even to get on a speaker system, a communication system to tell whoever, the traffic officers or whoever, how to best direct traffic to have it be resolved. Which of these images gives you the better viewpoint? Trick question, right? Like it's obvious. And yet, so many of us are looking in the wrong direction, looking from the wrong consciousness to create a world that works for all, right? We are looking at pie in the sky, infinite possibilities, and all this other stuff. Yes. And yet, we're looking at that from a position that is not going to create it. Why do you think that there are so many images of superheroes, such as Batman or Spider-Man, who are standing on rooftops looking out over the city? Why is Wonder Woman perched atop the statue and Superman hovering in space listening? Why? Because metaphysically it reminds us, now in the comics is one thing, metaphysically this reminds us to raise our consciousness and be in the space where we have a quote unquote bird's eye view. Oh, that's congested. Yeah, avoid I-95. And as a matter of fact, divert them at this exit, and then that'll resolve itself. And when we are at that level of consciousness, we see and approach life in a very different way. We are no longer bound to the ground in a way that prevents us from making life affirming, authentic, empowered choices. When there's a passage in the Bible that says, I lift my eyes to the hills from whence comes my help. In other words, I transcend my awareness. I lift my consciousness. I raise up. Now, there are those who translate it as the image before about, looking up to the scale of the building. I look up and see the building versus I look up in the way that Superman is looking up and out, the way Wonder Woman is looking up and out to see, to be aware of, to be in the space of enlightenment, conscious awareness, evolutionary change and intention, possibility, creativity, and imagination. And that too is our invitation right now to transcend and rise above. Dr. Holmes says, we are all carrying he says, negative, the non-life affirming experiences of our past into the future, merely because we have not disconnected them from our mind. Pause. Think about a non-life affirming story that you continue to tell yourself, even though the events of that story, whatever it is, it could be how someone did you wrong, how someone made you mad, how someone frustrated you, and you continue to re-envision, reignite, clear,
reawaken that past thing as though it was just yesterday, when in reality it was weeks ago, years ago, a whole different lifetime ago. So we continue carrying these non life affirming experiences from the past into the future because we haven't let it go. We haven't surrendered it and released it. He goes on to say, if we are creating a non life affirming future, it is because we have not changed our thought about it. If I am so entangled and bound by the past, I bring it into the present. If I haven't released it, surrendered it, healed it, then that is the energy, the thought, the mental equivalent, the consciousness that I carry into the next new now. This is why we are still in a world with war and racism and sexism, and the list goes on. Because we are taking the consciousness, the mental equivalent of the past, and when I say we, I mean the collective, and we are bringing it into the present, and we are continuing it on into the next new now, rather than disentangle from it, rise above it, heal it, transcend it, and create a new paradigm, a new mental equivalent, and a new consciousness. So many of us are carrying around the weight of whatever it is, past failures, past traumas, whatever wrongs have happened to us or by us. And I'm not saying to simply let the trauma go. There is a process, an intellectual process, an emotional process, a physical, somatic process to how we address and heal trauma. But what I'm saying is you can't even engage any of those processes if you don't recognize that you're lugging the trauma along, that you're reawakening it, or that it's being triggered within you, that the failures of the past, you're consistently being reminded of them or reminding yourself of them. How do you heal the anxiety that you're not even aware that it's present? So once again, self-awareness begins the process of healing and evolution and all of the other things. How aware am I of the stories I have been telling up till now, of the emotions I have felt up till now, of the actions I have engaged in up till now? How aware am I? And am I aware enough that I can now begin to change them individually? And when we are in conversation or relationship, to also begin to engage in the process in a way where it helps you to realize it for yourself so that you can also do the work. And then we go and we do it again, and then they go and do it again and again and again until the collective consciousness is now on the same page, telling the same story of a world that works for all, a world of peace on earth, goodwill towards all, a world where there are no dictators because there is no space within the consciousness for a dictator to even be born into that realm of thought, into that realm of action and activity. Are we doing the work now to make that a thing of the past? In much the same way that at one time in various places around the world, human sacrifice was a thing. Sacrificing the virgins was a thing. Accusing women of witchcraft and then killing them, executing them was a thing. And now it is not. Well, but why not? Because we learned, we grew, we evolved, we changed. If you're going from where you live right now to where you work, chances are you're not doing it via horseback. I mean, when was the last time you walked through the streets of Atlanta or Manhattan and the traffic jam was because everybody's horse or the horses were congested? And I think the last time I saw a horse on the street in Manhattan, it was because it was a police officer riding the horse, right? We've changed in our modes and methods of transportation. Are we willing to change our modes and methods of releasing what does not serve us, evolving into what does, the highest and best, that which is life affirming? George Santayana says, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Now, he's referencing things like, why do the members of the Jewish community say never forget? Because of Hitler and the atrocities of the Nazis. That's why. Why do people of African descent, people in the Black community or African American community, say similarly, never forget? Never forget how our ancestors were kidnapped and enslaved, forced into terroristic labor, and treated like animals. Never forget. Because the moment we forget, then we have politicians who are actively working to pass and passing anti-transgender legislation, anti-gay legislation, anti-women's body legislation, etc. If we forget the past and the atrocities of, chances are we may repeat them. So don't forget what triggered you to make you want to go get a drink. Don't forget what triggered you to feel like a failure. Don't forget it. You don't have to engage in it and go down the rabbit hole, but remember and approach it from a position where you have transcended and have risen above it so as to keep moving forward versus having that, the ghost of Christmas past, the ghost of Jacob Marley showing up to remind you of the miseries of life and how move past it. You can remember without repeating. Now, it's important to bear in mind this whole idea of past and present and future. So when we think of, a sculptor, for example, before the sculptor even starts chiseling, what is there? A block of marble, right? There's a chunk of stone, and that stone represents the past. Because the moment we move into the present, there's the chiseling. I am removing aspects, but I'm not removing it all. I'm chipping away. I'm chipping away at what I no longer want or need there to be in order to reveal what the future experience is. The future is the sculpture. The future is the work of art, the completed thing that is now being enjoyed, the thing of beauty that is being appreciated. But the stone is still there, just not all of it. So it's the same thing with our past. There are certain things we keep and other things we release in order to live into, in order to live into the desired experience. Michelangelo references this as I saw the angel in the marble, a world that works for all. I had the vision. I saw the angel in the marble, and I carved until I set the angel free. I see a world that works for all within the current world environment. And I do the practices to carve, to chisel, to chip away in order to set that vision free as a lived experience. That's our invitation. That's the practice. John O'Donohue says, each of us is an artist of our days. The greater our integrity and awareness, the more original and creative our time will become. So we're an artist who gets to craft the landscape of our day. And when we are acting from principle with integrity and awareness, then the ability to be more and more creative, innovative, and transformative, that ability will grow and expand. And as it grows and expands, the energy of it then morphs and further transforms our day, our lives, individually and collectively. The work that Michelangelo created wasn't just for himself, especially not now. There are hundreds of thousands of people who get to visit the various places that his artwork currently is displayed. Hundreds and millions of people, millions of people from the time that he, we'll say, carved David, from the time that that was completed, literally till today, that space of time, it's done today. That space. How many people have seen that statue? Millions upon millions. So his creative power, his creative gift has touched millions. How many millions? Your life, your art, your experience. People that you don't even know, people you don't even realize that you have reached. But when we are moving in principle, awareness, integrity, that's how this whole thing works. But getting there, as Bruce Lee reminds us, is identifying what is not useful, what is unessential, and then chip away at it, release it, surrender it, forgive it, heal it, whatever it is. But it's not about getting more and getting more and getting more and getting more. In many ways, it's about being more simplistic and releasing and releasing and releasing. For the sculpture, you don't add more, chip and add, chip and add, chip and add. For the sculpture, you get rid of. And even when painting, you're adding paint to the canvas, but you are also removing the blankness of the canvas. You are adding clay and shaping the clay, but you are also removing certain aspects of the space that once was there. So what are we invited to let go of? What are we invited to shed? What are we invited to release so that it is our integrity, spiritual principles, awareness, presence is what remains. What do you see? If I were to ask you to describe it, I'm not talking about the street and the person walking down the street, and just in the foreground, there's that line in the road, and then on the other image, there's clearly a hole. If I were to ask you to describe what's the difference between them, what might you say? Without going into, oh, well, this is what this is, or this is what it's for. Just describe what you see. Now, one of the reasons I bring this up is because Ellen Glasgow says the only difference between a rut and a grave are the dimensions. And someone else says the only difference between a rut and a grave is the depth of the hole and how long you plan to stay in it. What? Now, what does that have to do with anything that we're talking about today? Sometimes things happen in life and we feel like we're in a rut. A relationship might be in a rut. Our job might be in a rut. Our finances might be in a rut. Our day-to-day activities or whatever might be in a rut. Well, a rut is far easier to transition out of than a hole in the ground or a grave. A rut you can't be buried in. A grave you can. And many of us bury ourselves without needing to. We die without needing to die. In other words, we move from being fully alive to simply existing, to barely getting by, to just counting the days. None of us are meant to live that way. And there are many people who are forced, based upon the circumstances and the situations of the current world we live in, where there is war, food desert, ineffective medical care, etc. How do we change this? What is our role and responsibility in ensuring that this changes? Because if we're not going to get involved in changing it, then we are doing this whole thing called science of mind and spirit, or new thought, simply as metaphysical masturbation, just so we can feel good without actually being a beneficial presence in the world. It's pretending or performing like a 21st century New Thought Good Samaritan without actually being one. As the new year continues, we are invited daily, moment by moment, to shed whatever is not truly benefiting us or the world. The science of mind and spirit offers us a path and a practice for this artistic process of deconstructing, reconstructing, and simply constructing. For this reason, science of mind and spirit is a metaphysical liberation theology that sets the angel free, as Michelangelo said. What are we willing to chip away at today in order to reveal the beauty and the power of our truest selves, and thereby creating a world that truly does work for all? Breathe. This week's affirmation, our declaration, I will say it first, and if it resonates with you, say it with me on the second go round. As I release what needs to be released, I put another word in there. As I release what needs released, I claim a higher, happier, more powerful experience of life today. Together. As I release what needs release, I claim a higher, happier, healthier, more powerful experience of life today. Brave. So it is. This week's journal questions and the questions for the Thursday night study group. Number 1, what does this phrase mean to you? Principle is not bound by precedent. How might you explain this phrase to a person who is not familiar with science of mind and spirit? How might we be able to rephrase that for a more modern day ease of understanding? Number 2, what old story have you caught yourself retelling yourself or retelling to someone else? And the story is non-life affirming. The story diminishes you and it does not support your perceived self-worth. How does it affect how you show up in the world when you tell that story? What old story can you tell that is, in fact, life affirming, but it still is an old story? How can you balance between the old stories and the new stories in a way that elevates, benefits your life and the world? And then lastly, what habits or activities in your own life, personal, professional, social, what habits or activities in your own life have required a shift into new territory in the last few years? Now, we could really think about how many things in our lives have shifted since COVID, just that by itself. But what habits or activities in your life in various areas have required a shift? And what old ways of doing things have you had to release? What new skills have you, quote unquote, had to learn or you chose to learn? Entering into that space of prayer where we get to craft, we get to author the story that we are choosing to tell, the story that we are choosing to be. Because the story that is our life, the story that is our lives, the story that is this thing called life, this story is a living document that we get to backspace, 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 type a new line, delete, 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 type a new line, type a new paragraph, speak a new verse, sing a new song. This thing called our life, we get to craft. We get to flip the pencil around and use the eraser, and then flip it back around and write. We get to use the gold of kintsugi and connect the broken pieces and create an all new work of art. We get to choose. And as we choose for our own individual selves, we choose for the collective. As I heal me, my relationships change. As I heal me, my energy changes. How I show up in the world changes. And as I show up, it affects those that I come in contact with, whether directly or indirectly, whether consciously or not. The change occurs. How many of us have had our lives impacted by the life of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and yet we never met him? We never met Rosa Parks. We never met Malcolm X, Medgar Evers. We never met Harvey Milk. We never met a whole bunch of people, and yet the energy of their life, the energy of their presence, the energy of their contribution, the energy of their practice, and their contribution to this thing called life has moved us and inspired us, called us into action, triggered our imagination and our creativity, made us go into politics, become artists, become interpreters, become teachers, and more. And we get to be that for others as we heal, align, become aware, and live our best lives. Release what no longer serves in a life-affirming way. Embrace what does serve in a life-affirming way. Embody it, express it, be it, and do it. That is what it means to live the science of mind and spirit as a living document, a living testament to the power and presence of the universe incarnating itself as each one of us. And the law says yes. So with gratitude, I surrender it to the law, knowing that it's already demonstrating accordingly. It's already answered prayer. We breathe and let it be. And so it is. And so it is. Much appreciation and blessings, everyone. If you are available and you are desiring to join us over in the After Message Fellowship, see you over in Zoom. And if not, see you somewhere very soon. Namaste and blessings.